G'day mates, let's get creative. Welcome to Brushes with Beck. Today's video is a time-lapse of a giraffe colour pencil drawing that I did. In advance, I am going to apologise. I am sorry for the intermittent flickering of the video. It is only for the first few minutes and was an artifact of speeding up the video when I had slightly variable light in the real-time video. It hasn't come across well once I've sped it up. But I promise it does stop after the first few minutes, and it's not a problem then, so don't worry about that. So for this piece I am using Prismacolor Premier and Faber-Castell Polychromos pencils on Clairefontaine Paint on Naturel paper. I thought it would be a really good way to challenge myself if I did a sandy coloured animal on a similar tone paper, because it really pushes me to work the values and the colours to really make the giraffe stand out. So I actually swatched out all of my colour pencils on a sheet of this paper before I began, just so I could get a better feel of the colours, as I am working with a limited range. So I've only got a 12 set of the Polychromos and a 24 set of the Prismacolor, but I have removed the non-light fast pencils from my Prismacolor set, so that only leaves me with about, I don't know, maybe 16 or 17 of those. So as you can see, I've just started by working on the horns of the giraffe, and I apologise that I haven't spoken about this yet, but I've just layered in some base colours. So what I'm doing throughout the whole process is layering in some really light colours with a light hand, blending them out with a cotton bud, and then adding my following layers over the top. So for the ear here, I'm adding the white highlight room first because the ear is quite well lit, because it's white fur anyway, and being on a toned paper I've really got to get those whites in before adding in the darker colours. So I find that using a cotton bud to blend actually works quite well and gets a nice smooth result. As you might be able to see that this paper has a reasonable amount of texture. It's not super coarse, but there is a texture there, and so it really helps to blend out those colours. Now moving on to the head of the giraffe, once again going in with those base colours, and I'm trying to use a lot of different colours because I don't want my colours to look flat. So I'm using a light blue and some tans. I think I'm using a dark blue as well, and the black. Just trying to build up the layers slowly, and I'm sort of going in smooth, and then as I'm adding further layers I'm starting to add that fur texture, and always in the same direction of where the fur should be travelling. Otherwise it's going to look a bit messy later on and not look like the fur's travelling in the right direction. So I'm just trying to map out, do small sections at a time, because to do the whole head at once would just be way too overwhelming. There is a lot of patterning on the head, and between the tan patches and the sort of the pale fur, and then the shapes of the head and the skin folds, it was just, there was a lot going on. It was a pretty challenging piece for me actually, because I've never actually worked on, I did the kangaroo one, but that was a much smaller piece on a little sheet of A5, and this is A4 size. So there's a lot more going on. I love that eye there. I really liked how that turned out. So I worked the darks around the edge first to really solidify that, put the lashes in before working in some colour into the eye itself and layering black over the top and keeping the highlight in. And I think that turned out really well, especially since the eye in my reference photo isn't very well lit. I actually made it a little bit brighter than it is in the reference, because giraffe eyebrows stick out quite a way, and they actually shade the eye, well not the eyebrows, but like the eyelash, the lid. They shade the eye really well to protect from that harsh sun. Now once again moving to the fur, and you can see I've added some purple in here. I think when I went back and was doing this part, I just recently watched a YouTube video from someone that I subscribed to. I can't remember who it was now, but they'd been adding purples in to complement oranges and yellows to make them pop out a bit more, and I realised, oh, I haven't been including purple in my shadow and darker areas, and I thought that was a really good idea. So from this point on, I was actually including the purple as well, which I hadn't been doing before. And as you can see, I'm just trying to map out where the shapes are on the head, where the different coloured fur patches are. I'm laying down a lot of different colours on there before I add the dark brown that those patches actually are. And that really adds a lot of depth to those segments of fur. So they're not just a flat brown blob, basically. So just slowly moving across the head, getting as much detail as possible. So this giraffe, I was just thinking I should tell you, this giraffe I actually photographed at a zoo 5 years ago, I think it was. And I actually looked up the zoo on Facebook, sent them a message and said, hey, I photographed this giraffe, and sent them a picture at your zoo 5 years ago. I'm wondering what the giraffe's name is, because I like to know what I'm drawing. I like to know the history behind it, like what the species is, or if it's a zoo animal, do they have a name? And so I sent them this picture, and they were just like, oh yeah, that's Nakuru. And I was like, oh cool. So then I went onto the internet and searched Nakuru giraffe, and I found all this history about her, where she was born and which zoo she came from and how she ended up at that zoo. And it's really interesting. I'll pop all that information in the description box below. And I also got in contact with the Giraffe Conservation Fund because I was looking up information about different giraffe species, and I learned that giraffe had recently been reclassified because previously they thought there was, I think, one main species with multiple subspecies, and now there's 5 main species with subspecies within those. So she is a Nubian giraffe, and I've already forgotten the details. I was going to tell you about it, but again, I'll pop all that information in the description box. I'll let you know what I wrote to them, and I asked them about her species, and they gave me some information. And then I read more about the Nubian giraffe and the Giraffe Conservation Fund, and they seem to do a lot of really good work with conserving giraffe in the wild, which is super, super important. And it was actually World Giraffe Day last Sunday, so that was cool that I managed to finish this piece just in time before then. I'm afraid it wasn't up on YouTube before then, but it's taken me a little bit to get around to editing this one. So as you can see, I've worked across finally to the other side of the face, and I'm adding in those subtle blues, and I'm having to use my black pencil really lightly because I don't have any greys, which means I have to use that as like an underlayer and really use it with a soft hand and blend it out with other colours to help darken some of those colours. So as you can see, I'm just working in that other eyebrow now, getting the details in the eyelid and working those shadows. I found it really hard to I wish I'd sketched in more detail before I'd gone to the colouring stage, because I felt like I might not have quite gotten those shapes right. Even though I like the end result, I feel like I might have done a little bit better if I'd had a little bit more information in my sketch with the shapes and markings on the fur. Didn't need too much detail, I just needed a little bit more. And you'll notice here I actually forgot to draw in the lower eyelashes on this piece, which I only noticed when I did a repost of it on World Giraffe Day, and I did some zoomed in pictures of details of the face and the nose and the neck, and I was like, ah, and the first image I was going to show on the page was an image of her left eye, and I realised I hadn't done the lashes yet, so I've got to fill those in, add those on before I, take a photo of this piece for the YouTube video. And again, here's the other ear. This one went a lot smoother than the first one, much easier after having done that. Before moving on to the neck. Now the neck was so much easier after doing the head because, I mean, there's a lot of ground to cover, but there's far fewer markings, there's a lot less variation in the folds of the skin and that sort of thing. So it was a lot easier to work. And I actually really enjoyed working through the neck. Now, you'll notice that as I'm drawing in these fur patches, when I first start, they just look like great big bruises. Like some horrible, terrible injury because I'm putting in blues and yellows and tans, yeah, orange and purple, and they just look like bruises. But the point is to get that depth of colour, as I said, and it'll really help create a bigger impact if you have all those colours underneath to really push that final colour out. And that's really what I was working towards by adding all of those colours underneath. And a lot of that really is just practice, is A, knowing what colours you can use underneath others to help complement them, and B, knowing how to see colours in your reference. And that's something that I think really does take a lot of time, but there are tools and things you can do to help you to see those colours. I've seen people make colour swatch cards where they put the pencil on the cards, put a hole punch through the card, and then you lift up that card and hold it against your image to really compare the colour. And as you can see, there's another one of those fur patches where it looks like a bruise until I go over it with the final layers of brown and black and put in the fur detail. And then it looks like a normal fur patch, but it has a lot of depth to it. And that's what's really going to give the impression of a more realistic drawing, is that depth of colour and those values. So just working my way down the neck, using my reference all the time. I was constantly referring to my reference for this drawing, because even though the neck looks simple, there's a lot of different varying shades here and there where there's just subtle folds, and the way the neck's turned with the light, and it took me quite a bit of time, but it was very straightforward all the same compared to when I was doing the head. Just layering one colour at a time, blending them out, layering again, more blending. And the main reason that I'm blending with the cotton bud is to try and help fill the tooth of the paper a little bit more. Because if I didn't blend out with the cotton bud, it might be a little more gritty looking in the final layers. I mean, it still has texture to it, it still looks textured and has that slightly gritty look because of the paper surface, but it would be much more if I didn't blend out with the cotton bud in some areas. And you don't have to do that if you don't want to. I just like to do it. Some people, or a lot of people, use solvents to blend colour pencil. I haven't actually used solvents yet. And I'm not sure, I mean, they look like a great tool to use and I love the effect that they give, but my cats are around me a lot when I'm drawing, and I don't really think it's a good thing to be using around my animals, so I think I'm probably just going to not use it for the moment and just develop my colour pencil skills without that for the time being, and learn how to blend in dry blend, I suppose, without using solvents in the meantime. That one's a really good one to see the colours go over the top and the different tones underneath. Almost there. Just a few patches of fur to go. Layering and blending, adding in that fur texture. So I think all up this piece took me about, by the time I sort of cut it down and took out unnecessary pauses where I was sitting around staring at the reference, I think it was about 4 hours. So I probably could have spent a little bit longer, but I felt like it was quite finished. Just adding in some shading over the top there to really darken that up, and then adding in the chin whiskers, because I hadn't done them yet because I needed to do the neck before I did that. And the last final piece of the puzzle is the mane of the giraffe. And as you can see, a giraffe's mane is not blue or purple, but those are the colours I've started with to get some shadows in down towards the bottom of that mane before adding in the main colours. Main colours. Very bad joke. My apologies. Time to pull the tape off. Love that part. And here's the end result. Thank you everyone very much for watching. Please give it a thumbs up. Comment on the video, subscribe to my channel, whichever one of those you want to do. Do all of them, do none of them. I would prefer you did at least one of them, but yeah, give me some feedback. I'd love to hear from you guys. Check in the description box because I've got all that information about this beautiful giraffe Nakuru, about the zoo where she lives, and also the Giraffe Conservation Fund, who gave me some lovely information about her giraffe species. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next week for another video. Bye!